All right, let's open a case file on a creature you think you know. We're going to peel back the neon-drenched plastic, get past the animatronics, and find something much, much older. This isn't just a story about a monster. It's an investigation into an idea, a spirit of pure, timeless chaos. And our investigation starts right now. Just let that line sink in for a second. It's really the heart of our story tonight. We're going to explore how this ancient hostility, this negation, found its way into our modern lives. And, it often gets in through the very things we buy to make life easier.
So, our investigation kicks off in a place that should feel totally safe, familiar, even comforting. We're talking about the American suburb of the 1980s. But something ancient was definitely lurking behind those white picket fences. Yeah, repackaged is the perfect word for it. In the 80s, the spirit we're tracking went through its most radical makeover ever. It basically transformed from this old-world phantom, a soot-stained white from a blacksmith's forge, into a full-blown cinematic spectacle. It was the perfect monster for an age of VCRs, microwaves, and endless pop culture. But see, to really understand the monster, you have to understand the word. So let's rewind the clock. I'm talking about 1,000 years back. We're going to look at the linguistic DNA of our subject. And the first clues? They aren't in some dusty book of folklore. They're in the very language of Old English.
So here it is, the origin point. Before it was a creature, it was a verb, an action. Gremon was the act of being provoked, of being pushed right to the edge of anger. Notice the focus here. It's not about the thing causing the anger, but the feeling itself.
And here's where we find the true nature of that provocation. The act of gremon was tied to something grim, something fierce and hostile. This wasn't just being a little annoyed. No, this was a deep, savage vexation. And that is the core identity of the spirit we're tracking.
All right, let's jump forward in our investigation to the 20th century. Here, the spirit leaves the blacksmith's forge behind and takes to the skies. It starts haunting the new gods of the modern age, pilots.
Now these guys, men of science and steel, they didn't talk about ghosts. Of course not. They used cold, technical language to describe these inexplicable failures. But just listen to those terms. They're a mask. Behind all that clinical jargon was this gothic dread, a feeling that the machine itself was hostile. So, they did what we always do. They gave that hostility a name, the gremlin.
So you're starting to see the pattern emerge, right? This gremlin, it has always targeted our technology, from the iron of an 11th century forge to the biplanes of the 1920s, and then finally to the living rooms of the 1980s. It adapted its form, sure, but its mission, to provoke, that stayed exactly the same.
And this brings us to the spirit's most famous transformation. This is where the gremlin makes the leap from the cockpit right into our homes. But it doesn't just show up unannounced. It comes with a warning, a new kind of curse, you could say, a modern set of commandments.
Now, these aren't just clever plot devices for a movie. Think of them more like a modern parable. Just like that ancient smith was warned not to let his temper gremon the iron, the modern consumer gets 3 simple rules. And breaking them, it doesn't just create a monster. It unleashes that same ancient chaos right there in your kitchen.
And this shift is absolutely crucial. The gremlin became a living, breathing critique of our convenient, gadget-filled lives. It was the physical manifestation of the chaos that's just lurking under the surface of all our modern comforts. It proved that technology doesn't protect us from madness. Sometimes it's the very thing that invites it in.
So, what's the fallout from all this? In this act, we're going to analyze the aftermath of this pop culture explosion and see how it permanently changed the way we talk about things when they go wrong.
This right here, this is the whole ballgame. It's a huge linguistic shift. We went from a verb describing a feeling, grumman, to a noun describing a creature. We needed something to blame. The focus was no longer on our own anger, but on some external agent causing it.
But what's really fascinating is that even in its new pop culture form, the core psychology stayed exactly the same. You've got the id, this pure, chaotic desire to destroy. That's checked by the superego, which is all about those strict, almost magical rules. And caught right in the middle is the ego, just struggling to survive and cause as much havoc as possible. It's this internal conflict that makes the creature so compelling.
And this influence didn't just stop at the movies. As home computers started showing up in the 80s, we needed new words for when our shiny digital tools acted with that same ancient hostility. Bugs, glitches, come on. These are just the new names for the gremlin, right? It's the same haunting, just with a different vocabulary.
So we've traced the spirit for 1,000 years. What's the final verdict? What does this whole story, from an ancient verb to a cinematic monster, really tell us about ourselves?
And that really gets to the ultimate takeaway. It doesn't matter if it's a medieval smith trying to control his fire and his temper, or some kid in the 80s trying to stop chaos from completely taking over his town. It's the same timeless parable about our struggle to master the very things we create.
At the end of the day, the gremlin isn't just a monster. It's a reflection. It's a Gothic story warning us that our technology, all our conveniences, are only as stable as our own discipline. The power to provoke is a timeless and terrifying art, and our own creations are often the canvas.
And that's where we're going to leave this investigation. The next time your computer freezes, your car won't start, or your smart speaker just doesn't understand you, ask yourself, is it just a random error, or is it something older, a tiny echo of a 1,000-year-old provocation that you invited right into your home?